Yeah. Hey there, modern Canadian living enthusiasts. Hope you're all doing well. Welcome back to another one of our little videos. I'm just waiting. I just find myself staring into the incubators, watching the eggs, and hoping for that big day to come when they're going to crack out and come meet and join us in this world. But so far, nothing. I'm just waiting. And waiting. Still waiting, and continuing to wait for the big day. But there's got to be something that I can do to keep myself occupied for the next little bit, and that's what we're going to talk about in today's video. So stick around, because we've got lots to cover today. Hello again, modern Canadian living enthusiasts. Welcome back for another one of our videos in the Hatching Journey series. Today we're going to be talking about brooders. So if you're like me, you have put your eggs in the incubator, you've been staring at the incubator and just watching and waiting for the big day to arrive. But you're like, wait, when the big day arrives, what do I do? And that's what we're going to talk about today. Getting ready for the next steps, which is the brooder. There are some things that we need to go over. There's going to be some medication that we can use. I'll talk about some feed, talk about what's needed, and how to construct a different brooder. So stick around. All right, so for brooders, you can use pretty much anything. You can use a tote like we got here. We picked this up at our local hardware store. It's on special for $3, 3 Canadian funny monopoly money, and came with the lid. Great way to start. You can go with different sizes and shapes. You can build something DIY style. Make it round, make it square, make it different shapes. They come in wood, they come in plastic. You can use an old tent. You can use an aquarium if you've got a fair size one. There's no shortages of ways to come up with a brooder setup that works for you. Some things to consider are, first and foremost, ease of maintenance. Can you clean it? Can you take care of the chicks in it? Second of all, is it safe for the birds? Aquariums can be used, but you got to make sure that the caulking inside is not coming off and that the birds aren't going to be able to pick it off and eat it, because that could cause them problems. When you're looking at building one out of wood, the shape and size is going to be dependent on the number of birds. We always recommend going with something that's rounder or with rounder corners, like you can see on this tote. Having more pointed corners, birds can get trapped in there and not find a heat source, and as a result, they can pass away. So when you're considering a brooder, you got to figure out first and foremost how many chicks you're planning to accommodate. Something like we have here, this little tote from our home hardware store, is capable of handling about 12 to 15 chicks comfortably for the first week or two. After that, they will need to go into something bigger, as themselves they'll have grown, so they're going to need more space to move around. So once we have our tote or our bin, or we've built a box, a container, or you've gone and built a brooder setup like you can see here that we have, that'll be used in a little bit when the weather warms up. It's still a little cold. The brooder is located in our garage, so that's why we're currently doing the indoor versions. Once we've selected what brooder we're going to use, next on the list is a light. They need to see. Especially for the first few days of life, chicks need 24-hour light. So for the first week or so, you're going to want to make sure that the light is left on all day, all night, so that they can easily find food and water. For us, this just clips on the side. For right now, this is fine. After about a week or so old, you will need to put the lid on. We'll show you guys how to prepare that with some screening so that they can get some air and some light. But you will need to put the lid on after about a week so that the chicks don't jump out. We need to make sure that they stay in here, stay warm, comfortable, they have food and water, so they can just grow up and be healthy. Once we have our light, we need to talk about bedding. There's a few options here. You can go with the shavings, whether it be the wood shavings. Stay away from cedar. They are toxic. Make sure you go with the aspen or other brands. You can also go with hemp bedding. Those are fine too, and they have less dust than the wood shaving style. That can be used after about a week. For the first 3 to 7 days, we need to be using paper towel, or in this case, brown butcher paper, shipping paper that comes from Amazon, anything of the sort. You can use newspaper. You need to stay away from the slippery or glossy style, like that most flyers and coupons come on. We don't want to use those. If it's too slippery, it can cause injury to the birds. They can have splayed legs, which is when their hips and legs separate. They can slip around and they can get injured. It's the same reason that we need to use bedding and not just have them on the bare floor of the brooder itself. Unless it's something that's extremely grippy and you want to scrape that to clean it, make your life easier by using bedding, you need to have something that's not going to cause them to slip or injure themselves. So for the first week, we either use paper towel or brown butcher paper. We simply place some in the bottom of the tote that's acting as our brooder, and that's what the chicks will be on for the first couple of days. You can easily take out the paper, change it out when it gets too messy, put a new piece in, till they're about a week old, like I said. At that point, we will be switching to shavings, hemp bedding. There's different materials that we use here. I've got a little bit of some shavings, some wood shavings just to show you. These do make dust. So if you are using the wood shavings inside, I would encourage you to get a tent or a kids pop-up play center. It will help control the dust. Maybe a filter fan just to help pull out some of the dust particles that are in the air, because it will get very dusty in the room that they're in. If you're using the hemp bedding, there's less dust that comes with it, but there's still some. It's not dust-free 100%. It's just a lot less. If you're sticking with the paper, you are going to need to change it out more frequently, but you shouldn't have any dust problems. Bedding is important. You will need to decide, depending on the size of your brooder, what kind of method you want to go with. For chicks, we don't recommend doing the deep letter method until they're like several weeks old, just because of bacteria and everything else. We don't want them to develop any diseases like coccidiosis. So just something to keep in mind. So for the first few days, up to a week, we were saying we use paper as the bedding on the ground. But that means that they're going to need something for their food and water. So we do have a cute little waterer here and a little feeder. These are great for chicks. They're low, they're small, easy for them to get into, to get the food, get the water, make sure they have everything they need. If you get ones that are too big for too small of chicks, they won't be able to access the food and water. So these are cute, and they do need to be refilled frequently because of the size, and having 12 to 15 chicks in there for a couple of days, they will empty this a couple times a day. But it's worth it. It makes it easier for the little babies to go in and get the nutrients that they need. Something we recommend is an elevated platform for the food and water. Something like this, you can place your feed and water on, and it will help keep it off of the ground when the chicks get a little bit older and you start moving into that bedding like we were talking about, especially with the shavings. Having the shavings all go around with this sitting low on the ground, the shavings will go into the water, they'll go into the food. You can do like we did here and just use an old piece of hardware cloth with an old Tupperware lid, super glue them together, acting as a perfect little stand for our feed and water once the chicks are about a week old. This will help keep it clean, like I was saying, and just prevent any other messes that you don't want to happen, like the water constantly getting knocked over or filled with shavings. So when you're shopping for feeders, you will need feeders for chicks. You will need feeders for older chicks, when they get to be those 3 to 6, 7 weeks, let's say. And then once they get past that 7 weeks and onwards, you're going to need, again, a different size feeder. If you go too big, too fast, you may not get the food or water they need. If you're too small, they may run out of food and water, so you'll be replenishing it more. So things to consider is you will need something for your chicks, and then you will need something for later on as they progress and grow up. So next on the list is heat. Of course, they need to stay warm. Chicks need a temperature of about 95 degrees when they first enter the brooder. That's 95 degrees Fahrenheit. They start in the hatcher around 100, 101. They enter the brooder at 95, and then we slowly begin to step it down week over week by about 3 to 5 degrees until they're acclimated by about that 8-week mark so they can go outside and enjoy the weather without any risks. To do that, we need a heat source. And in our case, we're going to be using a heat plate. We've talked about these before in our other videos. We prefer the heat plates over the heat lamps. We just find they're safer, less risk to the birds, less risk to, well, to us, to the property, to fire, to everything, right? So we use a heat plate like this. Has a little control knob up here, on, off. You can set the intensity of the heat. The legs allow you to raise or lower it on the sides. Currently, that's about chick height. That's where it would be starting. So the chicks would be just below here. And then we'll raise it up about 1.5 inches every couple of days or so. We want to make sure that it stays about 1/2 inch to 1 inch above the chicks so that they have enough heat, but they're not having a risk of getting burned. Something like this will be fine for the first several weeks as they get acclimated. And then once they get to that 2 to 3 week point, you no longer need this depending on the temperature of the room that they're in. So heat plate, definitely on the list. You can use a heat lamp if you'd like to do so, if that's the journey you're on. But we recommend and encourage everybody to use heat plates. It's a much safer option. So, just like us, chicks need to eat, right? They need feed. And that's something else you're going to have to get yourself is some chick feed, some starter feed for the chicks. They cannot eat the same feed as the layers or the growers at this point. When newborn chicks hatch out, you're going to need to acquire some chick starter feed. It's basically the same feed with some added nutrients and vitamins and then crushed down to chick appropriate size so they can eat it and digest. There are the medicated versions and the non-medicated versions. To each their own, whichever you prefer. We do use both here depending on what's being requested for the chicks that we're hatching out for others or how we want to start our chicks. We do use the medicated feed at first for the chicks, and those are for the chicks that we keep for ourselves. Those that go to different customers, it depends on what they would like us to start their chicks on. But again, there's the medicated and non-medicated options. Look into them, decide which one's right for you. This just helps ensure that the chicks get off to a great start and they don't have any problems or risks of certain diseases or infections like coccidiosis. So, things to consider. Good choice of feed. Not just feed, though. We also have supplements. So here we have 2 little bottles that we use. They're for different things. They add nutrition and vitamins to the chicks, to the chickens. We use these for the babies. So the chicks, we use them when we notice a problem. 99% of the time, we don't use these on chicks unless we notice something is a little off with 1 or 2 of them or one of the groups. We mostly use these on our adult chickens, but you can use them on chicks. The thing we need to consider is these are concentrated. A little bit goes a very, very long way, so we want to make sure we're not overdoing it. What we recommend is take the directions that are on the bottle for the age and size of your chicks or chickens and half that amount. So cut it in half and start with that. If that goes well and you still need to give them more, do another half dose of what's recommended on the bottle so you don't create a dependency or shock the system. Too many vitamins and minerals too fast is worse than not having enough in the systems and just can cause a whole bunch of problems. So make sure you're using vitamins and nutrient boosters like those accordingly. One of the biggest things we do with them is during the winter, for example, shorter daylight hours, the humidity, and just the smell sometimes from being in a more closed environment. We give these to the chickens outside just as a little boost, just to help revitalize their guts and revitalize their immune systems, keep them happy and healthy as always. Something that's not pictured here is grit. So chicks will have their starter feed, like we have here. They'll be eating and digesting, and like we mentioned in previous videos, chickens don't digest the way humans do. They need a grit source, so little rocks, little pieces of sand, crushed oyster shells. This is what they use to help digest and break down their food. When it comes to chicks, they need this as well. We start them off on the grit, the 3 to 5 day mark if they're still here and if we're keeping them. If they're going off to a new coop, that would be on the new owners to take care of. But chicks will need grit just like adult chickens. The only difference is it's going to be much smaller. So for chicks, you can use things like sand, beach sand, the store-bought beach sand, not just picked up off, the beach. Play sand that has been kiln dried and cleaned. That's okay in little doses, but you will want to avoid any of the masonry sands, any cement sands, or anything that has any binding agents in it. You can also get the chick starter grit, which is pretty much crushed up oyster shells smaller than the regular chicken size. They have other varieties out there, variations on it, but make sure you do get grit for your chicks. They will need this by a week old and later, but sometimes even before, just to help with the digestion and keeping them healthy and getting them ready to go for eggs, right? Once we put it all together, you can see that this is what the brooder setup would look like. We have the heat plate located down here. It's currently set to its lower setting to allow the chicks to get the warmth. We want to make sure that it is a couple of centimeters, so about 1/2 inch to 1 inch above the chicks, and we want to continue to raise it so it stays at that height as the chicks grow up. We have the feed and water located up front, not too far from the heat source. This is important for the first few days to ensure that the chicks can find everything. Pro tip, when you're bringing the newborn chicks over after they've dried off and they're all fluffy and ready to go into the brooder, you're going to want to make sure that you dip their beak in the water when you place them in the brooder. So you'll carefully bring the chick over, bring its head down, dip its beak in the water, and then place it under the heat plate. You're going to want to do that for each and every chick. This will help it find the water and find the feed source. Once that's done, and everybody's in here, they'll spend about a week to 2 weeks in a setup like this for about 12 to 15 birds. After that point, they'll have gotten too big for this type of setup, and you'll need to upgrade to something like we shown at the beginning of the videos, or start moving them outside if it's that time of year and you have an indoor protected section of your chicken coop. There are variations that you can take on anything that we've shown in the video. Just make sure that it's safe for your chicks and will help them get the best start possible in life so you can have the best chickens later on. Get as many eggs as possible, right? Because that's what all this is about, is eggs. Well, you could also be doing it for the meat side of things, but that's a whole separate series that we have. So again, we hope you learned something. There's going to be some more videos coming on the later brooder setups. We'll have some more tips related to the hatching series overall, and we have some more videos coming on the hatching journey, including on when it's time to take the chicks out of the incubator and move them into the brooder for the first time. So as always, everyone, thank you for sticking around. We hope you learned something. Make sure to like, subscribe, turn on those YouTube notifications, follow us on Facebook. There's so much left to see and do, and we'd hate for you all to miss anything. Until next time.